Hi everyone, happy Throwback Thursday. I'm very excited today to spend the next hour with you along with my good friend Steve on talking about how to achieve 90% Microsoft Teams and Yammer adoption. My name is Dux Raymond Sai with AvePoint, and boy, it's going to be a jam-packed hour. So Steve, why don't you say hello and introduce yourself?
Hi, good afternoon, good evening to some of you, good morning to a lot of you. My name is Steve Wynn. I'm Yammer Product Evangelist with the Yammer Product Team. Dux, I'm super excited to be here with you talking about Yammer and Teams. A lot of people kind of see me as the Yammer guy, but of course, for me, I'm really just passionate about helping people be productive in general. So, really excited to be here with you to talk about the subject.
And you know, I've known Steve for a long time. And again, Steve, thank you for joining us. You talk about passion and Yammer. Boy, I don't know anybody else would be more passionate around Yammer. But with that, let's go ahead and jump in and kind of give everybody a highlight on what we're going to cover today. So we're going to hit four key points today and really talk about in a very practical way on how you can drive 90% adoption within 3 months, right? We'll walk you through a strategy, we'll walk you through a timeline how you do this. But first of all, we're going to cover what the landscape looks like today. When we talk about modern workplace, what are the different roles and how people work and just the nature of our global business. Second, we'll talk about how we can take advantage of Yammer to connect across your organization. Essentially, we'll give you a high level overview. We assume you already know what Yammer is, but we're also going to give you a quick primer on what Yammer is and how it connects folks across your organization. Second, I'll talk about Microsoft Teams, what Teams are for, its purpose, and how it can facilitate teamwork within groups of people that work closely day in, day out. And then lastly, we'll talk about how you drive sustainable adoption and really hit that mark on achieving 90% within 3 months. So if we look at the modern workplace today, with technology and digital trends just changing how we work, I'm sure when you woke up this morning, I hate to admit this, but what's the first thing you grabbed? Like for me, I grab my phone, look at all my news feed, look at my email, look at what's going on with my team in the other side of the world through Teams. So it's just the way we work. Work is not 9 to 5. Work, it's not a physical place anymore. And because of technology, it enables us and empowers us. So, Steve, what's your typical day like in this modern workplace?
Yeah, I think Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, of course, talks a lot about this mobile-first world, and so I think a lot of the way, like you described, I think a lot of us start our day on mobile. But I think the other thing is just the shift in the ways in which we're working together. I think we'd all agree that none of us are successful anymore as individuals. The vast majority of the work that I think we all do happens in teams with one or two or three or more people working together towards a collective goal. So it's become much more important that our individual productivity skills are transformed into teamwork productivity skills. I think the other thing that has really shifted is just the importance of our own personal networks. I often tell people that, when I come to a particular job or I come to a particular workplace, it's not just me that you get. You get me plus the network of people that I bring. I often use that, if some of you maybe remember the old Verizon commercials where the Verizon guy, who's now the Sprint guy, used to have those commercials where he had the army of people behind him. And he would talk about how when he comes to your door, you don't just get him, you get the knowledge and backing of everybody behind. And so I think, in large part, I think that's another shift that has happened is the personal networks that we bring to our organizations.
Well, Steve, I want to share a quick story about network. So as we were preparing for this webinar a few weeks ago, I think you shared this on LinkedIn. You shared like, hey, there's this webinar around adoption I'm doing with Ducks. And then I saw a lot of people sharing it and commenting. And then there's this one person asking, hey, is this recorded? Because it's in the time zone that I'm not able to join. So I responded to this person. Her name is Teen. I said, yeah, it's recorded. We'll share the link with you. And then we got a conversation going. And then we found out we had common initiatives that's going on. And then now we're going to do some joint initiative out of Belgium. So powerful.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's as we talk about kind of where Yammer fits in, and that's really where Yammer fits in, is in this building of people's networks and building of an organization's networks and starting to connect people. I mean, that's really the bread and butter of what Yammer is. It's about connecting people across your particular organization, and so that's really the mission of what Yammer is to bring broad groups of people together, bring broad perspectives across your organization together, whether it's knowledge or whether it's people. We want to use Yammer as a place to bring all those people together. Like you said, there are people that you don't necessarily know who might be interested in this particular webinar. You might not necessarily know who might have the same question as you within your organization. Yammer helps to serve to bring all those people together. And so, just for those of you that aren't familiar with Yammer, these are a couple of the things that, if we go to the next slide, Dux, these are a couple of the things that people have found valuable about Yammer. I'm not going to talk through each one of these things. Of course, I mentioned the importance of Yammer as a network, and I often say that your network is only as good as the number of nodes that are in it, the number of people that are in it. So really think about Yammer as a place to bring people together to connect on knowledge and connect on learning, those sorts of things. I'm not going to talk about all of these things, but I think there are two things here that I think are fairly distinct when it comes to the value that Yammer brings to Office 365. The first one is around discovery and search. Yammer, I think, is unique in the suite in that it's that place that you can share information with a vast audience, a vast employee base, and be able to connect with those people and share information with people that you don't always interact with. It's also a place for people to discover that information. So when you think about things like email, where you're kind of directing information at a very specific intended audience, Yammer is that place for you to share information with people that you may not necessarily know. The other one is around staying productive. We've purposefully built Yammer not just to be social, just for social sake, but we've really built it in such a way that we want people to be able to be productive. So the things like the inbox in Yammer help to triage messages that are focused for you, conversations that you're mentioned in, conversations that you're participating in. All those things come into your inbox so that you don't have to navigate through all these groups and through your feed to find those messages that you're involved in. But the inbox really helps you to provide some focus on the conversations that are most meaningful for you and the one that you're participating in. So, Dux, why don't you talk a little bit more about Teams and where Microsoft Teams fits in the landscape?
Sure, friends. As Steve talked about the broader scope of Yammer, its intent to connect folks across the organization. It works hand in hand with Microsoft Teams because when we think about Yammer from a broad organizational perspective, where teams come in, it facilitates teamwork for the people you work with day in, day out. So for example, in my organization, I work closely with my marketing colleagues. I serve as the Chief Marketing Officer for AvePoint. I have phenomenal colleagues around the world. There's about 60 of us. And day in, day out, we work on a lot of marketing initiatives. Now, in the past, with a lot of different initiatives we're working on, there's been some disconnect with the different technologies we use. So for example, certainly we'll be using email to communicate, to share information. And sometimes we have meetings on Skype for Business. We may be chatting there. Or we have a team site where we store all of our documents. But if you think about all that, while we may be working towards the same project or deliverable or goal, let's say preparing for Microsoft Ignite, we have these different channels that's disjointed. And that's where Microsoft Teams come in. Microsoft Teams is the hub for teamwork that can really connect all the dots and have that true one-stop shop for your immediate team, your posse, the group of people you're working with, to work together effectively. And then when I talk about working together, it's beyond collaborating on documents. It involves, chatting, instant messaging, doing meetings, co-authoring, sharing information, all in one place. It's deeply integrated with all the other Office 365 technologies. certainly were enjoying the benefits of the security and compliance that Office 365 provides. And more importantly, it extended beyond the typical workloads we're used to, like document management or instant messaging. But now it also comes with advanced technologies like bots. For example, out of the box, you can just go to Microsoft Teams store and look for bots you can take advantage of. There's a bot out there called WhoBot, where you can ask organizational structure. I can say, who does Steve Wen report to? And then it'll show the information right away. And Microsoft Teams is very open that other parties and partners are building connectors or building bots, so you can be more productive and you can work better together with your colleagues. Today, there are over, I believe, 150 different apps and connectors and bots that you can take advantage of. So, for example, I have some customers who uses Box for their document storage. You're actually able to connect Box as a storage mechanism for Microsoft Teams. So if you're not familiar with those, make sure you check it out. We have tons of great resources around Microsoft Teams. And just to give you a perspective on how you can quickly get started, certainly if you have Microsoft Teams, all you have to do, if you're not familiar how to get it, go to teams.microsoft.com. And as soon as you get there, you can create or join a team. Start chatting. Within the team, you have what's called channels. So within a channel, you'll have a tab that allows you to chat. You can start working on documents, do your meeting in Teams, and be very, very productive. Certainly, as we move along the conversation, we'll show you specific examples and practical ways that you can take advantage of Microsoft Teams. Now that we've kind of looked at what the modern workplace looks like today. Now, speaking of modern workplace, this is my modern workplace, and thanks to Yammer and Teams, I'm still able to connect with my organization and my colleagues. How do we make it work? You know, Steve, I'm sure you talk to a lot of customers. One of the most often conversations I have is, you know, while all these technologies are great, how can we make it useful so that it will help people to get their job done faster, better, sooner? As we all know, you know, no matter how great your technology is, change is often met with resistance. I mean, change is hard, right? And we all know this. This is a study. If you're looking at this statistics, by the way, it says only 34% are the early majority willing to adopt new technology within the enterprise. This came from a study called The Diffusion of Innovation. The author is Everett Rogers. He's been studying on how pretty much organizations adopt to technology change or innovation. And I'll talk more about this in a second, but if you look at this number, certainly this is the number that that's not good enough, frankly, right? We want to excel and gain more adoption as we roll out technologies like Yammer and Teams. Steve, any stories or thoughts you want to share around the initial push for these technology and why is there lack of adoption?
Yeah, I think sometimes what we see is that the focus perhaps is in the wrong place. I think a lot of times the reason that these new technology initiatives fail is because of that overemphasis on technology. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit more, about how to perhaps reduce the emphasis on the technology and maximize the emphasis on behaviors.
No, that's a good point. And just to kind of back up some of this statistic, this is a recent study. If you guys have Gartner, if you subscribe to Gartner, this report just came out. It's called the Maximizing the Value of Office 365 by Making It Part of a Digital Dexterity Program. It's a great study and a great research around why adoption isn't picking up as much as we would like. So these are the three key findings, right? The first finding, and by the way, this study is not only for Office 365, they also looked at G Suite, and the adoption challenges are similar, right? So in this study, the challenge, first of all, the key finding is that SaaS productivity platform, Office 365, G Suite, Move is typically a lift and shift initiative, that there's no new value being delivered. What does that mean, right? So if you think about your organization, oftentimes when you're migrating Office 365, what goes first? Email, right? And to me, as a user, like email is email. It's, maybe it's more reliable if it's in Office 365, but that's nothing new to me. And then after you move email, you move files, OneDrive, right? Maybe you move SharePoint. Well, that's all good, well, all great. There's, for me, there's no perceived value. So that's one big issue and one challenge. It's taking that lift and shift approach and not thinking about how do we deliver business value right away or business value quickly. And we'll definitely talk about that.
Yeah,
The
if I could just
second,
interject one thing
right,
on here, Dax, is that it's hard to have these conversations without the inevitable question of which tool when coming up. And I think it's interesting that this study, in addition to talking about Microsoft, also like you said, also talks about G Suite. But which tool when is kind of the you and I believe that it's kind of the wrong conversation to have, right? And it's it's maximizing the right technology for the right purposes for the right behaviors. And again, we'll talk more about that.
yeah, 100%, right? It's the days where we as IT, and I'm guilty of this, it's kind of like, the days of a fast food approach just doesn't work anymore. We can't go around and say, hey, Steve, how do you like it Office 365? You want some Teams, Yammer, SharePoint? Let's supersize it. Let's throw it Power BI. Next, doesn't work, right? So we'll tackle that, and we'll talk about practical ways now you can position business value leveraging these tools. The second adoption challenge that this report found is organizations are ill prepared to deliver continuous change provided by the productivity platform. What does that mean? So if you think about our traditional model of IT, right? Let me pick SharePoint. I've been working with SharePoint the last 15, 16 years, phenomenal technology. But if you look at back in the day of SharePoint 2007 or 2003, first of all, the upgrade cycle is 3 years, right? We as IT, we set up a new farm, we do the upgrade, we tell everybody, hey, SharePoint 2007 is up, have a good life, don't talk to me until the next upgrade. It was okay back then, but today, with the nature of the cloud and the innovation that's coming out, there needs to be a shift on how we think about not only managing and maintaining the platform, but also thinking about where we invest our energy and resources. So for example, back in the on-prem days with SharePoint, a lot of organizations would custom build stuff, which was okay, change the look and feel or custom build a workflow or deploy a solution. While you can, I guess, do that in the cloud, certainly Microsoft provides all that capabilities, but unless you're fully staffed and really on top of it, if you continue doing that and all these changes come out, certain things may not work. So that's an issue, and that can hinder or cause an adoption challenge because stuff quit working. The second big thing around continuous change providing SaaS platform is how are you organizing your resources and your team to make sure, okay, if a new workload comes in or a new capability comes in, how are we introducing this to the business, right? So the concept of adoption is not a one-time event anymore. The idea that we just do training to drive adoption doesn't work. How do you sustain it? We'll tackle that as well. So this is something that has to change if you want to increase adoption. The last bit, and this is fascinating, is this lack of digital dexterity investment. So what does digital dexterity mean? So with digital dexterity, it's the idea of how do you make technology, especially our investment Office 365, as part of the norm or as part of the day-to-day habits, lack of a better word, of your employees in the organization. Because just by saying, hey, starting tomorrow, we're going to use Teams, we're going to use Yammer, what were we using yesterday, right? If you start off with email and then suddenly you decide we're going to flip the switch and everybody has to use SharePoint or Yammer or Teams, without that transition and not making it a part of their day-to-day habit or work, it's a problem. That's why I hate to say this, I love SharePoint, but there's still tons of SharePoint deployments out there that's nothing but a glorified file share because it wasn't, somehow it hasn't evolved to be a part of the day-to-day business practice and business process of that department or that group or that organization. So that's the other challenge around driving adoption. So with that, we talked about the typical model of training as a part of adoption, which is important. So Steve, I want to turn it over to you to kind of talk about why training alone doesn't work.
Yeah, so all transparency, I used to work in a learning and development group at a previous employer, and training is definitely a part of the equation. But I think all too often people overemphasize it, and to me, the biggest piece is that third point there is that it lacks context. You might be rolling out Office 365 or rolling out Teams or rolling out some new capability, and you incorporate training into the plan, which is good. It happens at the beginning. But it's kind of like new hire onboarding. I often sense that a new hire coming into an organization is just flooded with information, flooded with content, and they're trained on how to use the new expense system, but they haven't taken a trip yet. So using the expense system is kind of out of context for them. So I think, of course, have some emphasis on training, but also have some emphasis on perhaps ongoing coaching and ongoing training. As Dutz emphasized on the previous slide, it's all about supporting ongoing adoption throughout your users and your employees' journey. So think about training as not just a one-time event, but something that you can support people through community, support people through connections.
100%. And this idea of driving sustainable adoption, as Steve pointed out, includes training as a critical component. And I don't know if you know this, Steve. Are you into productivity and habits? Do you know how long it takes for a habit to stick?
There's a myth, but sure.
So what's a myth?
I've heard 21 days.
Yeah, so for a habit to stick, on the average says 21 days, or somebody said 10,000 hours, you keep practicing, whatever. But there's actually another research in terms of organizational adoption to new technology. Guess how long it takes?
How long, Dux?
15 to 18 months on the average, right? So if the mindset is, look, our only adoption strategy is to send people to training or make people watch webinars like this and adoption will happen, sorry, it's not. So if it takes 15 to 18 months, and given, I'm not scaring everybody, that's not the intent, but the point being is, how are you being intentional, putting together a strategy on how you drive this adoption? And the magic question, especially with respect to this webinar, all right, Steve, all right, Docs, you guys talk about a big game, you talked about all the goodness of these technology, but let's get to the meat of it. How do you achieve 90% adoption, right? So I want to put this in context. First of all, what's the basis of this 90% adoption? If you guys haven't looked at or read Diffusion of Innovations by Everett Rogers, I encourage you to do so. Essentially, this whole study, and by the way, organizations use this study, the US government used this as a basis to really talk about how innovations in organizations or communities spreads out or diffused. That's one. And second, what are the patterns of adoption, right? So quickly, in this study, it found that, look, anytime an innovation is introduced to a group of people or to an organization, there are 5 different segments on or phases in how people adopt. One is the innovators. This is typically people testing it out, your IT or that project team, trying to figure it out, taking that risk. And then next is your early adopters. Think about your pilot group, where either they raise their hands or you pick a group to learn about it, to use it, all that good stuff. And then once you deploy it, production-wide, company-wide, then you would have your early majority. Now, when you hit this point, obviously your intent is the whole organization to take advantage of it. But almost always, there's only about 34% of that group you push out that would embrace it and adopt it and use it. And then there's your late majority and then the laggards. Now, the time frame of this varies, but what we're talking about is, okay, for this early majority, right, or this first group between your innovator, early adopters, and early majority, if you do if you do the math, this is like 50%, right? How do you bump it up to 90%? So what we're going to do is We're going to walk through 3 very specific strategies and guidance for you, and we'll show you examples on how you do this, and then we'll wrap it up with like a 3-month essentially roadmap that you can take, you can use. It's very practical, and you can start doing. So with that, let's look at the first tactic or the first strategy on how you achieve 90% adoption. So Steve, what's the first technique that you've seen over and over and it works really well?
Yeah, let's dig in. So the first thing around specifying the rules of engagement, I think sometimes we'll hear people say, I'm getting emails from over here, I'm getting messages from Yammer over here, I'm getting messages from Teams, I'm getting text messages, all these things, right? So there is a lot for people to manage. But I think part of it is, I think what's been lacking over time is we haven't really taken the opportunity to come together as a group or come together as a team and say, you know what, here's exactly how we're going to work. Sometimes we do certain things. You say, you know, we're all going to use, as an individual, I may say, I'm going to start using Teams. But we haven't really made that clear with the rest of the team that that's how we're going to operate. And so I think what's been lacking oftentimes is just a simple action of people coming together and saying, you know what, here's how we're going to operate, and everybody putting their hands in the middle and saying, go team, and let's agree on how we're going to move forward. But the first example kind of related to that is around corporate communications and collaboration. I think we've all faced we've all had those emails where we're celebrating a new hire, celebrating somebody just got an award, or celebrating somebody leaving the team, whatever it might be. And then there's inevitably the flood of emails that come in afterwards, congratulating the person, and then you have to do stuff with those emails, right? Well, I was working with a company that was faced with this same situation, and they decided, you know what, we're going to do something different. We're going to reduce the volume of email that's associated with those sorts of announcements, and we're going to move all of those communications over to Yammer. So this was a regional team. They said, you know what, anytime there's a new hire to our region, or anytime there's an event that we're announcing, or if there's some sort of big thing that impacts the region, they're going to post that to Yammer. So the expectation was set going forward: do not send any of those emails out anymore. Post those things to Yammer, and we're going to use Yammer as our venue, as our channel to have conversation and communicate about those things going forward. So that dramatically reduced the number of kind of one-line celebratory emails that typically were exchanged. It actually boosted engagement, of course, on Yammer, but it also boosted engagement overall because people were starting to participate in those conversations much more, because Yammer was a much more suitable place for those back and forth celebrations to occur.
Well, Steve, let me jump in. Let me talk about this. And this is, I'm sharing as an example from my company at AvePoint. So this is one thing that we did. First of all, obviously leadership and key people in the organization agreed to this. Then we work with the corporate communications team and HR to say, anytime if there's a company all email, be it a new employee or our CEO with some announcement, the full message is actually posted in Yammer, all company. And then what we would do, because we recognize, a lot of people still love their email, we would take that conversation thread, the link, and then write an email, all company, but we BCC all company because we don't want to reply all going on, and then just have a summary of the message in the email to say, dear AvePoint family, today we have a new colleague, Steve. He works in this office. Click here for full details. So when they click on it, it jumps to the full post, and that's where people say, hey, welcome, Steve. Glad to have you in the team, etc.
Yeah, that's and maybe moving on to the next slide, I think you have another example of this, but just to build onto that, I think that's what other successful organizations have done, is that they all channels, once you've communicated that out, it, like you said, change is hard. So you need to continue to push people in the direction that you want them to go. And so in your example, I think it's great because now all roads are leading to that one place.
Yeah, and then so just speaking of examples, right? So again, here are some rules of engagement. I'll show you some screenshots as well. One of the things you pointed out, Steve, early on is, for us, when we onboard our new colleagues and new employees, we have new hire training. that's one of the things they get. They actually have a one-pager checklist of, I know you mentioned what tools to use when, but really talking about what are the communication collaboration tools. And we don't go in detail to new hires because they won't remember everything, but to say, hey, if you want to connect with the whole company, there's this thing called Yammer. Check it out, and feel free to read and know all the people within your immediate team. You guys are using Microsoft Teams. Your manager should be able to onboard you, right? So the key part is not only specifying the rules, but we talk about expected roles and responsibilities. Key leadership should be made aware of what's expected of people and what's expected of them.
Correct.
So, here are some examples, right, in specifying rules. So we talked about this already. Post company-wide message in all company group and send link via email. Another example I want to show is this one, post office announcement on specific Yammer group and send summary via email. So in this example, and this is, how we've set it up at AvePoint, each office has a Yammer group. So my colleagues in each office, Arlington office, Jersey, Japan office, all that. So each office for my operations colleague, any office specific announcement or activity, they would post it in the Yammer group. Be it an event that they do or any activity that's going on, they post in that group. Now, certainly you may argue, well, I do that all the time, Docs, but nobody reads it. And then my colleague at the end of the week noticed that Emily actually sends a BCC to everybody working Jersey City. Good morning. Click the links here to see updates. So every link is a link to a post in that group, Jersey City Family Day. So they did a family day. And then once people click on it, they see it, they can comment, thank you, all that good stuff. I tell you, after maybe 2 weeks, obviously there's time, people adjust, then people are well adjusted. They keep doing this, now they're subscribed, now you're creating this habit, right, for people to check and look. It doesn't mean, I've gotten feedback and comments from customers saying, well, it's too much to follow and too much to watch. Well, I would argue it's no different than email. We have tons of emails, but you just have to be mindful and pick which one you want to follow, which one you want to subscribe to, all that good stuff. And you can send your alerts accordingly too. So this has been very, very effective for us here at AvePoint, where each office has an office group and all office related announcements are there.
And I would add on there, I think a really important point to make here is for those of you that are maybe struggling to try to get activity going. I think this activity of curation that we're seeing here, I think, is a really important one because again, it's about what Emily is doing here is she's not only informing people, but she's also trying to pull people in. She understands that by providing some summary, some cliff notes for people, it helps people consume it in a more in an easier way. And then like Doug said, after that, it's a choice. It's a choice for people to click through and participate in it, if they choose.
I lost your audio.
Oh, is it back now?
Yeah, I got you back. Sorry. Awesome. Yeah, and then the other thing I want to bring up too around this example is, oftentimes we think, oh, we told everybody to use Yammer, we set this up, but nobody's doing it. Well, the one key point around here is we brief the operations team. So I work with Emily's manager closely, Deborah, and she talked to her team and we trained them on how to do this. So once we have Emily doing this and Deborah and everybody else around the world, then it's just a matter of people receiving this information and being able to get to it. And again, once they get used to it, we see a lot of engagement, adoption, traction on Yammer. And then the other example around specifying rules, right, is in Microsoft Teams. So we talked about Yammer company-wide, and then Microsoft Teams, some examples. So I want to share a very specific example, and then I'm sure Steve can share too. So again, this is a screenshot from my organization, AvePoint. So for my role, I serve as a chief marketing officer. One of the guidelines I put with my colleagues and team is that, look, anytime there's communication and collaboration that involves more than 2 people, you cannot do it on email. That's a rule. Certainly, if there's something that's private, that's one-on-one, that's not urgent, you can still use email. But if anything that's involved with going back and forth and working on stuff, that's where Teams come in. So for me, if you look at the screenshot, I have my AvePoint marketing team. So we have different channels we created. We have a main channel called General channel. So notice in this case, Evelyn, who's one of my colleagues who looks after a technical writing team, is introducing a new colleague. Hey, meet Jenny. She just joined a technical writing team. And then Violet is asking for help on blogs for Singapore. And then notice that each of this team, each of the group within AvePoint Marketing, the digital marketing team, the field marketing, content marketing, they created their own team so that their smaller group can work together and collaborate and communicate. Now, for me, this is valuable. Why? Because as the leader of this organization, especially with a globally distributed team, I don't have to keep bugging people. Hey, Steve, what did you do today? I can quickly look on what people are working on, what they're talking about. I can jump in and help, all that good stuff. So it just streamlined and changed how we work. Not only is it much more efficient, but there's a lot of visibility around it too. In this next example, this other team working on documentation, we're doing our next release for Citizen Services, which is a product that we have. Notice that the document is still is within that team. This is powered by SharePoint. It's stored in SharePoint. But not only can people co-author and work on it, but the conversation around that document is also visible. So this way, there's context around the document people are working on. So the point being is, when we talk about specifying rules of engagement, the rule within my team is, look, we will use Microsoft Teams for day-to-day departmental collaboration. And then one other thing I want to share is this one. So I don't know, Steve, do you see my screen?
Yeah.
I just want to, okay. So I want to share this. So this is one of our colleagues, Dufan. Dufan unfortunately moved on. He moved on from our team. So when I announced to the general team, I said, hey guys, it's with mixed feelings. We'll miss Dufan, effective August 4, moving on and going back to be closer with his family. So as soon as I posted that, I said, hello, AvePoint Marketing. So this is the entire marketing team. Right away, quickly, a couple of things popped up. People acknowledge that they read the message by clicking like, and then look at what everybody, how everybody responded, right? We'll miss ya, take care, much respect. So it puts a very personal touch versus emailing back and forth, right? And then not only that, apart from being able to verbalize it in text, people can put pictures and videos. And then what's funny is on Dufon's last day, he said thank you and best wishes, and he has this mic drop meme or Giphy that he put in. So it just changed how we communicate and collaborate, just made it much more efficient and effective. Steve, you want to share this example?
Yeah, and this is another example of one of those things where our team really had to come together and say, this is how we're going to work together. I work in Minneapolis. Of course, I have colleagues in San Francisco and in Redmond and in Texas, all over the place, right? And we'll get sent emails from account teams and from customers. And a lot of times previously there was always that back and forth email of, hey, are you going to take this? Or hey, Dux, can you answer this one? And so then there's those there's those unnecessary emails that go back and forth just about who's going to answer the email. We can't just pop our head over the cube and say, hey, Dux, I'm going to take this. So what we decided to do was use Teams as kind of our back channel for just even basic things like responding to emails. So an email would go to the 5 of us, and then we would forward it into our team. And you can see in here there's a screenshot of how you can get the yeah, the email address for a given channel within Teams, and so we would email that message into Teams, and then I might raise my hand and say, "I got this. Don't worry about it." So that way, it's a signal to the rest of my team. They've received this message in their email, but they also don't know. Is Steve going to respond? There's Duck's going to. Who's got that? Who's going to take point on this? So I raise my hand. I say, "I got this." It takes the burden off the rest of the team. But then there's those moments where perhaps I don't know what the answer is, or we need to have a bit of a discussion behind the scenes before we actually respond to the rest of the people on that email. So we use Teams as our kind of back and forth to be able to chat about what our response is going to be, or perhaps who is going to formulate the response and ultimately take the action of responding back. So using Teams to actually benefit the way that the efficiency and accountability of who's going to respond to email.
Awesome. That's a great example, because I know a lot of people just deal with that every day, right? Where somebody emails and a bunch of people are copied, and then there's other side conversations going on. And if you do it in Teams, not only it's much more efficient, but also through time you can easily audit it too, versus all these email threads going back and forth. Now, hopefully this has been very beneficial for everybody thus far. I just want to get a temperature check. Please pop in the chat on what you guys are thinking. How's everything going so far? And again, we see a lot of questions coming in. We'll definitely answer that, but we want to get through a lot of these ideas and tips and tricks so that you can definitely take advantage. So keep those questions coming, and then share some of the thoughts and feedbacks you have. So the second tip, right? So we talked about make sure you establish the rules of engagement on how you're going to maximize these technologies. Second, very important, you have to facilitate leadership buy-in. What does that mean? It can't just be a lip service saying, hey, we're going to go Office 365, we're going to digitally transform, we're going to use all this goodness, but that doesn't apply to me because I'm a C-level. All I need is my iPhone and my email. Doesn't quite work, because having leadership involved, bought in, and taking advantage of it, and frankly, being a good role model is critical to success. Certainly, I don't have to bring up the point that with Office 365, you have tons of financial benefits, but beyond that, right? Let's talk about business benefits. So one simple example I have is in our organization, just by using Teams, or broadly in the global perspective for company-wide or Yammer, the communication cycles have been brought down. So for example, if we're working on a customer opportunity, we're writing a proposal and we need help, a good example of last, I think, a year and a half or 2 years ago, I had an opportunity to work with a government agency here to propose a migration from Lotus Notes to Office 365. Yes, Lotus Notes. I know a lot of you haven't heard of that word because you weren't born yet, but some organizations still use it. And I have a lot of background experience in migration, but I haven't really done Lotus Notes. So I didn't know who to ask, so I just jumped on Yammer and I said, hey, AvePoint family, anybody work on Lotus Notes to SharePoint or Office 365 migration? Hit me up. And I tell you, in a matter of a few hours, my colleague in Australia, Blair, jumped up and said, hey, yeah, we worked on this. We work on it a lot. We have a lot of customers. I'll ping you on the side and I'll talk to you about it. And as such, now I was able to talk to Blair. He gave me the heads up. I helped write the proposal for my team here. We got the proposal out sooner. That right there is money, and we won the opportunity, right? So just shortening that cycle of communication allows us to gain business. So there's a lot of financial proof points you can bring up, but there's a lot of financial benefits that certainly leadership can appreciate. Second, demonstrate better transparency. We talked about this already with the value of Yammer, for example. You can allow the rest of the organization and showcase what you're working on. But one example for us, and Steve will talk more about from a technical perspective, what Microsoft's investing in, is we use Yammer for our town hall. Every quarter, our CEO, TJ, would hold a town hall in a specific office that we have around the world, and then we would broadcast it live and use Yammer, and then people would feedback and comment, all that good stuff. And then last but not the least, especially with Teams, it just expedites organizational agility, where we can respond, or in some cases react to what's going on, and allow that going back and forth, be it working on a document or chatting or working on a video. So a good example of this is a few months ago, there was a tweet that came out around Kaizala. If you guys aren't familiar, Kaizala is a wonderful, wonderful new technology that allows mobile messaging. And when the tweet came out on how Kaizala is growing, expanding, I told my team and said, hey, we should do a video. And then suddenly we start ideating on this video through Teams. And then a day later, we start recording the video. So all that allowed us to do it in a very effective fashion. So Steve, some examples around leadership buy-in and leveraging these platforms?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I do want to emphasize, though, is that, like you said, it's not just about sponsorship, leadership sponsorship. It really is about leaders being actively engaged. And you, as a leader of AvePoint, I think sends a really strong signal to your organization that this is a place where we want you to interact. This is a place where we want your feedback. And as we've talked with leaders in organizations, one of the things they get really passionate about talking about is Yammer, because it allows them to connect with employees in a way that they don't really get to with by using other tools. It gives them a perspective about what's happening across the company in ways that they don't normally get to. And that's a reason why we're putting a lot of focus, a lot of emphasis on this leadership connection scenario, because we hear over and over and over from customers this business objective of wanting to better engage their employees with leaders, and conversely engaging their leaders with employees across the board. So we've recently put into public preview a new live events capability, which allows organizations which allows leaders within your organizations to be able to broadcast via video across the company through Yammer. So we're excited about that, and we'll be continuing to invest in capabilities that help leaders better engage through Yammer. And one of the ways that we do this quite a bit within Microsoft, and of course many of you that are well connected to Yammer probably know about Satya and his book. Hit Refresh, where he documents in great detail the culture change that's happening across Microsoft since he's become CEO. And so there's an ongoing dialogue since 2014 when Satya became CEO, around this notion of a growth mindset. And we're since that time we've been actively using Yammer to push that agenda and push that thinking across the organization, and helping people understand what does it mean to have a growth mindset. And I love this example, this fairly recent example, a person saying, I just learned what it means to have a growth mindset, and having this open dialogue in Yammer, and then being supported by other people talking about what other resources are there for people to really have that growth mindset. So if I'm a leader within Microsoft, I'm starting to become I'm starting to get really encouraged by the change that's happening, because I'm seeing that it's meaningful. I'm seeing that it's it's starting to become a part of our employees' lexicon.
One thing I noticed here, Steve, I really like it. We talk about, specify the rules of engagement, right? Just within the CEO connection group, in the info section, how to ask a question, right? To some of us, we may think, well, this is straightforward, but having that guidelines, I think is still very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, that's a really important part of just helping people understand how to engage. It seems basic, but I think it really helps set some guardrails.
And similarly, this is just a screenshot of our town hall group in Yammer, where we do our town halls. And once the town hall is done, it's available on demand. That's in Microsoft Stream. And certainly the nice thing about this is, all the conversations are there, and our leaders can respond to all that good stuff. Another example I want to bring up, so we talk about leadership buy-in around Yammer with Microsoft Teams. So I already shared the example where, for me, I have a geographically dispersed team, and it allows me to provide visibility not only to me, but to everybody else. So this helps us facilitate better knowledge management across document, chats, and meetings. And even better, we can integrate line of business tools. So as a company, we use non-Microsoft tools, for example, like we use Jira, we use Hootsuite, and there's already connectors built in that we can bring it into our team environment. Some other examples, so these are screenshots again with my colleagues. So here for the field marketing team, they're talking about swags we're going to give out for events. So Steve, as you know, Ignite's coming up and swag is a big deal. So we're talking about all the swags we're going to provide, and we're checking for the rest of the regions who wants the swag, who needs it translated. So Anne-Marie's from UK, Martina's from Germany, Adeline's from France. So they're like, yeah, we want to get that, this, that. So it's really powerful. And for me, I can look at what swags we're going to have. On this other side is my colleagues in technical writing. They have a channel called Just for Fun because this is a globally distributed team. What they've decided on a regular basis, they'll post pictures on how their day went, where they had dinner, or what's going on. Like Dorothea from our CC office showed they had double rainbow. So this kind of, while we're all here to work together and help grow the organization, this helps bridges the personal aspect of it as well. So this is something we really appreciate and we really enjoy doing.
The other thing I want to bring up quickly here is in connection with the leadership connection scenario, is what we see oftentimes is communications teams using Teams as kind of, again, the back channel for what's happening perhaps on Yammer. Perhaps there's a Yammer connector. We can maybe add that as a screenshot in here, but there's a Yammer connector for Teams. So maybe you set that connector up to talk about growth mindset, or tag it for growth mindset. So anytime growth mindset is mentioned, then that Yammer conversation gets pushed into the communications team. And then that way, then the communications team can say, hey, how do we want to address this? Or do we need to do it? Do we want to emphasize this more? Or whatever it might be. So that's a great way to kind of combine both Yammer and Teams, and using Teams as that back channel for that conversation.
100%. So this is an example. So we, in our AvePoint Marketing General channel, I added the Yammer tab. It's a Yammer connector, and you can, customize it as to what you want to look at, a specific group. So definitely, it's well integrated, and that serves as, like what Steve says, a back channel. Or for me, we're monitoring, all the marketing mentions on Yammer. So we, as a marketing team, we're on top of it, and we can look at it within this one-stop shop, right, within Microsoft Teams. All right. So last but not the least, ensure quick wins. So Steve, I know we talked a lot about quick wins, so it's all yours.
Yeah, I think sometimes I talk with teams and they think they're small, they're understaffed, under-resourced. I try to help those teams understand what are the broad strategic things that you want to focus on, but then also I think the third point on here, activate your champions. So you don't have to be the only people that do it. Look for the other people within your organization that are passionate about doing these things, and engage them as well, because it starts to become a lonely world when you feel like you're the only person or only small group of people in an organization trying to enact this change. So I'd say one of the important things about this is really look for other people that can help evangelize your message on your own behalf, whether that be from a Yammer perspective of helping to create other types of other communities within your organization. It could be helping to evangelize different ways for teams to be productive using different tools. So really think about ways that you can bring other people into the fold to help you along. Some examples of ways that you can get some of these quick wins are, what are some of the broad corporate initiatives that are happening that you can attach to? So from a Yammer perspective, if maybe you're trying to encourage new innovation, new product development, new services, start to engage people in campaigns around those sorts of topics. External collaboration, Yammer is a great way to be able to bring in external expertise into existing groups, so that you can start to bring in people from outside the organization. Of course, learning and enrichment. I think Yammer is a great place for feeding people's curiosity, feeding people's desire to learn and find information from other people. We talked about forwarding emails into channels within Microsoft Teams. The Teams mobile app is super responsive. I think that's probably one of my most used applications on my phone anymore, just for those chats that I frequently conduct with my teammates and colleagues. But then conducting meetings, I think, internally at Microsoft, I think probably the 90% of my meetings now happen within Teams, and we recently announced feature parity between Skype for Business and Teams. So lots of great capabilities and functionality that happens within Teams to make it much more engaging, full screen, things like full screen video. I love some of the capabilities around being able to have a chat specific to a meeting before the meeting, where we talk about things about what we're going to cover on the agenda, and then after the meeting, having that persistent chat continue to be there. Recording the meeting, having that automatically sent to stream and transcribed and all those things. So really some rich benefits from using Microsoft Teams to conduct your meetings.
I know, Steve, you have a hard stop in a few minutes, so we'll certainly understand you have to take off. We have your contact info here as well. But I wanted to show some of the things that Steve talked about. So one of the corporate initiatives we have as a company, we have this thing called AvePoint Idol. Every year we have this competition that's open to everybody in the company, and the idea is if you become the AvePoint Idol, you get a chance, all expense paid, to attend Ignite as an attendee. So a lot of people are joining. We make it fun. People have to do certain things. They have to send in little videos saying why they should be the AvePoint Idol, and then the rest of the company votes. So you can do things like this, or even drive some learning around it as well. So a lot of great ways to get those quick wins. And again, Yammer is a phenomenal platform that you can use to connect company-wide for these quick wins. And then with Teams, as Steve mentioned, meetings. So we as well, we use Teams for meetings all the time. One of the great things with meetings is the ability for it to be recorded, and also what's coming is these meeting recordings certainly will be available on demand through stream, but it's also transcribed. That's something I can't wait for, because think about it, right? If your meeting is transcribed and you do a search, let's say you weren't able to attend the meeting, you don't have to watch the whole thing. You can just jump into the part where that point was raised or that conversation happened. So I'm sure there's going to be more innovation around meetings, or modern meetings as they would call it, leveraging Teams, but a lot of these quick wins that you can certainly start with. So before we wrap up, right now, I know hopefully some of these ideas and guidelines on how do you achieve 90% adoption, from specifying rules of engagement, ensuring leadership, buy-in, and engagement, and then number 3, identifying these quick wins, resonate. Here's an example 90-day roadmap where you can kind of get started and really see your adoption go up. First month, for example, start with identifying 3 use cases for Yammer and 3 use cases for Teams. You don't have to do it for the entire company. You can pick a group, but just take the use cases we've shared with you. And certainly that, I'm sure a lot of it applies to you too. And then talk to specific leadership. Even if you want to start with your department leader and get buy-in and say, hey, moving forward, all offices, instead of blasting announcements via email, let's create a group for each office and let's put all the announcement there. And then put together these rules of engagement and how-to resources. And it doesn't have to be complex. Look, you don't have to create a training manual on how to use Teams or Yammer. There's tons out there, but the rules of engagement is around your world, your organization. And just make it simple and make it straightforward. And if people want to learn more in detail, point them to a lot of the great Microsoft resources out there. So the second month, so month 1 is planning, figuring all this out, getting buy-in. Second month is go at it. If you can engage 3 departments or 3 different groups in the company to pilot Yammer and Teams use cases you've identified in month 1, identify what works and what doesn't, track it, modify it, and configure Yammer and Teams to support use cases. This is important. You know, the idea that, okay, we'll put this use case together, we'll hand over to business, they'll figure it out. No, it's not gonna work like that. So really, you have to curate and tailor the experience so that these use cases would apply, and obviously through time, as people learn, they'll be able to do it themselves. 3rd month, this is if you're confident use cases work or you modified it, launch it company-wide, encourage leadership to promote it. So for example, our leadership, they're on Yammer all the time, they engage with people, and then showcase and highlight wins of Yammer in Teams. We see that regularly in our organization and a lot of customers we work with, and then rinse and repeat, right? So continue doing this, and as long as you make it consistent, make it sustainable, boy, you would definitely see that adoption go up. Here's an ebook, and we'll share this with you. We have more detailed information on what these technologies are, and you know, I know we're at top of the hour, but let me spend maybe 2-3 minutes. We have tons of great questions and comments. These are our contact info. Feel free to connect with either of us. If you want to hit us up on LinkedIn or Twitter, or shoot us a quick note, feel free to do so. But Steve, if you're still on, thank you so much for joining. I know you have to bail, but hopefully this was beneficial for everybody.
Thanks for including me, Dux, and happy to answer questions offline, and yeah, feel free to reach out to me. Thanks everyone for participating, and look for both Dux and I at Ignite if you're going to be there.
All right, so for folks that need to jump off, we will post this in a blog and post all the questions we get, so it'll be answered. So let me start looking at some of the questions here. I'm willing to adopt Teams with my team. What are your suggestions to incentivize my team in the adoption of it? Incentives. So for me, when I talk to the team, I first highlighted the benefit, but you could do, you know, a little fun little incentive, right? Like for example, you can say, okay, for the next 2 weeks, you know, the person who sends the least number of email, and when I talk about email involving collaboration, communication, we'll get a gift card to Amazon, or we'll, you know, it's just little fun things to get it going. So you can use that as an incentive. But certainly, if you're in a place where you have the authority or the leadership to be able to have your team do it, go for it. What are your recommendations to use Planner into Teams? I mean, I love Planner. Planner, if you're not familiar, we have a great blog post about it. Check it out. Planner works hand in hand with Teams. So you can actually not only use Planner separately, but you can use Planner into Teams. So for example, for us, we have a team for Microsoft Ignite. We're planning for that event, and all the action items and assignments are in Planner, but it shows up in a tab in Microsoft Teams. So what are my recommendations? My recommendation is use it and then bring it in as a tab in Microsoft Teams. Great question. How does an intranet fit into the equation? So it does. So think about it this way, right? Yammer is company-wide engagement. Teams is within your posse, within your group engagement. Where intranet comes in, this is where SharePoint comes in. So SharePoint has made a lot of great inroads into enhancing the experience around your traditional intranet portal. So where your intranet comes in, intranet serves as that reference point where every employee needs to know, you know, upcoming birthday, upcoming events, you know, the CEO's blog, you know, more broadcast and referential information is in the intranet. But when we talk about engagement and connection and going back and forth, that's where Yammer and Teams come in. I do have a webinar I did in the past, like when to use what. I talk about intranets and SharePoint as well, so feel free to check that out. All right. Boy, it's been an awesome session. Hopefully you guys found it beneficial. We're out of time, but we promise you we'll take all these questions. We'll put a blog post out with a link to this webinar. Other than that, have a phenomenal Thursday. And for those in the US, enjoy Labor Day weekend. Hit me up on LinkedIn, hit me up on Twitter. Have a great day. Thank you.